right. Thanks, Chelsey and Drew, for deciding to come and chat today. I think we're going to talk about some issues around learning in professional services firms and leadership, specifically engineering, but I think probably could apply in architecture or maybe law or others. I don't know. But I imagine probably applicable across the board in a lot of different sort of professional services types environments. So we have Chelsey Line, our chief of staff, and Drew Hess, consultant at Copeland. And I think we'll just get started. There's no, we don't have like a, what's it called, a script for this. So we're just going to talk.
Yeah. One thing that comes to my mind when I hear the word leadership is I love to hear everyone's stories behind how they got to where they are, or the why behind what's important to them in their leadership practices that they bring. So, Matt, do you want to kick us off on telling, not to put you on the spot or anything like that, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to lead Copeland and what's important to you as the leader of the firm?
Yeah, thanks. It's a long story. I'll try to make it. It's at the risk of going like too far back and into too many details. I think the bottom line is like, I think like a fundamental aspect of how I see the world, and in no matter what circumstance I'm in, like going back to even when I was a kid, whatever environment I'm in, I, for better or worse, am kind of always looking for opportunities to make it different but better, like, and that those things are always kind of occurring to me, whether I want them to or not. So when I'm in a situation and I can make some change, I'm generally a happier person. So that has led me into various situations where I can be in somewhat of a leadership role, because I am generally wanting to try to enact these things that seem to make sense to me. And so whether that, be in like Boy Scouts as a kid, and taking leadership roles there, or in a professional setting, or in a school setting, in like a club or an organization or something like that. I think it all kind of stems from this idea of like, I just notice things that I would like them to be different, and then try to take steps to make them that way. And so that probably makes me a pretty poor employee, because like I don't necessarily want to just go along and get along. Like I will notice things that I want to be different, and either get frustrated that I can't make them different, or like keep going until they somehow get different. So I think that was sort of an inevitable outcome, that I would end up trying to do something on my own, where I could have a little bit more of that input and control to try to address those things that otherwise just gnaw at me. And so I think that sort of is like the fundamental underlying reason of why I find myself in this situation.
What's interesting to me, what you said, Matt, was you said that characteristic might make you a poor employee. I think it's interesting because I think that actually would make you a good employee, right? Like we would all want people, like what we're doing, we want to be passionate about it and we would want to make it better. But I think sometimes sort of systemically, if you're not in the right culture, you're either A, not given the resources to make it better, or B, you're like checking the box, so to speak. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like makes you feel frustrated.
It's a good point, and it's something I really want to try to cultivate here, is like this ability to both have a framework, but then and encourage the leverage that comes from using that framework, like using systems and procedures, and not reinventing the wheel every time. But at the same time, having this culture of openness and like that at any point, anything we were doing could be different. Like just because there, the cliche thing is like, well, we've always done it that way. And everyone knows that's a like stupid way to approach life and business, but still most do it that way anyway. So I want it to be not that. Like I want to always be open to new ideas from anybody. But at the same time, like have the framework that is constantly improving and constantly evolving. But maybe Drew can talk about like whether we're succeeding in that or not. But like I do want that. I want those employees. Like I want the type of people that are like, you know what, I have an idea about this and I think it could be better if we do it this way. And then like can be the advocate for that too.
Yeah, no, I think I I had one point just kind of a little further back, which goes back to like good employee or not, like you said, Matt. And I could see where you're like get that thought of like, oh, like I'm, I don't want to do this way. So it kind of maybe in a sense puts you in like a rebel position, within that firm that you could have been in. But I think that kind of like characteristic makes you a great like creator. And like, I think that's a cool way for the characteristic to take you in a good direction. And I think going even back to the start of our conversation, I wanted to say like why you become a leader. I feel it's always different for everybody, but one of the things I've realized over time is it's like sometimes you realize something you want to do, and the only way to do it is if you're a leader, you know what I mean? And like you kind of get thrust into that position to say like, well, no one else is going to take these responsibilities except me. So it's, if I want to, reach these goals or like see through this like thing, I have to just take up that position and, not only learn, but, take the responsibility. So
Yeah,
I
that's a
definitely like
huge
that point.
realization and like a moment in life and in career when you start to have that level of accountability and like just self-reliance, where you recognize that kind of anything you want ultimately is up to you, right? Like,
Super powerful. It's a very
yeah,
powerful feeling.
Wow,
yeah.
Yeah.
guys.
I'm glad you said that, because I think too many people like view it as um, they can view it in a negative way, like in that, like if something is not happening, it's like, man, I'm failing, or I'm not, I'm not good enough to get this thing done or accomplished. When I find it really empowering too. I find it like it very inspirational, empowering to know that like if something is not the way I like it, then I can do something about it. Like it may take a while, it may take 10 failures before you get there, but like if the opposite to me is when it's like this is all out of my control, I can't do anything about this, that's defeating. Like I find that super demoralizing and defeating. So I love that what you just said about like it, finding it empowering to know that that attitude of like this is actually on me. That's super powerful.
When I think cultivating that space, like Matt, you just said, maybe you might fail 10 times, but that's okay. Maybe the 11th time it'll be better. Like cultivating the space as we're trying to develop leaders, that it is okay to fail. And Drew, this is like going back to a previous conversation you and I had around when I first started. Matt, Drew shared with me, like in his head, leader has to be someone that gets it perfect and always has it together. And I kind of laughed, as my kids are screaming behind me and he spilled them. I'm like, well, nope, that's not gonna, but empowering people to make mistakes so that they can learn from those mistakes and learn to lead. And actually think some of our best moments as a team come from the mistakes or come from some of our lessons learned, and they help us to lead others or teach people how to make the situation better. And you only learn that if you fail, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
Yeah, I
also
think
too like, oh,
go
sorry,
ahead, Drew.
Matt.
Need to
Oh,
talk.
just like, I guess it's just like saying like, as you feel like when you kind of grow into that more leadership position too, like it's easier to like, I guess just find more grace in your failures because you really, I don't know exactly what I'm getting at totally, but I
I
just,
think that makes a lot of sense, though. I think like if it's this virtuous cycle. I think if it goes well, where um, as you've demonstrated over time, perhaps that more often than not, you have the right idea, or at least a decent idea. It both becomes easier for you to give yourself some grace, and then also probably for others to give you some grace too, and that just builds on itself, I think. So there is probably something to that, where it's easy to say, looking back, like, oh yeah, all these things that I messed up were really helpful in the end, and they got me to where I am now. But it can definitely be hard in the moment, especially when it's earlier in your career or earlier in life, and it maybe like it's still the first quarter, and like you're the outcome of the game is not quite so clear yet, and you're like, man, maybe this is like a fatal error, like maybe this mistake is actually a real big deal and it's going to totally derail everything. So there's definitely something to that. I think the one, like the thing to keep in mind is that the preponderance of advice and opinions from people like is on the side of like it's okay, like that the failures are helpful and good for the most part, and like they do teach you and you do learn from them, and all the bumps along the way really do get you there in the end.
Mhm.
Like you don't hear, there's not so many stories of like, wow, well, yeah, they screwed that up early, and that was the last we heard of that guy, right? Like that's not as common. So,
Yeah.
so you can take comfort in that, right? That like, even though it may not feel like it in the moment, and certainly, I've been there many times, but like, if you can try to maintain that faith that like, yeah, look, I know it doesn't feel like it now, but everyone tells me that this is going to be good in the end, so I'm just going to soldier on and see what happens. Like that
Yeah.
I think is pretty helpful to get yourself like out of the moment a little bit.
It's just like cool too, like kind of go into Matt's experience with like, you're working in like your garage and like a foldable chair, and now look where you're at, which is like the coolest thing ever to look back on. It's like that's empowering in itself, but it also, if you push through those things and like you then get to that point where, you have 12 people in your company, you have an office, and it's like everything was so worth it. And like you like love those failures, like because they
Yeah, for
just
sure.
you wouldn't have, you know, been who you are today without them. So
The fun thing about that too is that it is a constant reminder, like, or I should say it differently, maybe. I have to constantly remind myself that it's really important to compare only to yourself, and like to where perhaps you were a day ago or a week or a month ago, not to like where anybody else is right at this moment. Because even to me, like, so if on any given day, I might look around and be like, man, like I see these other firms doing this or that other thing. I see the projects they're doing, or like the 5 offices they have, or the big, corporate event they just arranged where they have flying people in from all over the country, and they have a speaker, and they have all these things. And like, so I can look at those things and be like, man, like like, how are we not doing that? But it's comparing to something completely different. Like, like who knows what their history has been, who knows what their circumstances are. Maybe they've been in business for 40 years.
Yes.
Right. Like there's all these there's a million factors. So really the only thing that's like useful to compare to is your own self and your own journey and your own progress or lack thereof or whatever, and evaluate based on that. So, and then that's why I'm glad that I at least kept track of some of these things a little bit along the way. To be honest, when I started, I had visions of like documenting the journey with, quite a bit more fidelity than I ultimately did. But like life gets in the way, and, it turns out that it is actually like quite a bit of work to run a business. So I didn't do as much of that as I may have wished at the time, but I did do some, and so that's the reason I have some of those pictures and stuff. So when I look back at that, I have that same, that is motivating to me. And when I can show myself that like, yeah, look, over time, like, and it's, the funny thing is like in the moment, it seems like a ton of time, like it seems like forever. But when you look and you say like, man, it's only a couple of years, like then all these things have happened. Like that's pretty amazing too. So it's definitely important to like keep those different time scales in mind, and to keep in mind like your own experience, is really what you want to be looking at, and like try not to concern yourself too much with like what other people are doing. That's like the most cliche thing ever, but it's 100% true.
it's so
Yeah.
true because like it's I've done that a lot too with like more kind of in like my music part of life, and like
Mhm.
I don't know, you end up again kind of appreciating the past more, and that it's like your track and like your life, like you said,
Yeah.
it's you're never going to be anyone else. And as you've kind of pushed through those times, you really appreciate that, like, you are who you are, and you've stumbled across this path of how things have worked out. So
Yeah. That's been probably one of the biggest realizations, is that like, um, I think when I started in my career, and probably, even through school and stuff before that, I think I had this implicit assumption that everybody else kind of had, there was this universe of people and businesses and career paths and things like that like
Mhm.
was the way it was. And they had things figured out a certain way, and like they knew all these things that I didn't know. And if I was not fitting into that somehow, or if I wasn't living up to certain parts of that somehow I was, like I was deficient in that way, in not being able to meet that, like fit in that hole and like fit that puzzle piece into that spot. And like it's been like a slow dawning over time, that realizing that like nobody has anything figured out, and like and everyone has their own little piece to add to the puzzle, and being able to figure out like what the heck your piece might be, and then have even just a little sliver of confidence that that's valuable into the bigger puzzle that's getting put together. Like that piece has been so important. And just recognizing that like it's not really that you're trying to fit into some pre-existing tapestry, but like you're really like just you're weaving it along with everybody else, right? Like you're a piece of this thing, and like you have some unique aspect to offer. That's been very helpful, and also very difficult to figure out. taking some time, but it's really important.
It's interesting for me to hear both of you guys say that this was kind of a lesson learned, like the not to compare yourself and you're on your own timeline, because to me, like from my perspective, I'm brand new, and to me I'm like, oh, Drew and Matt have that figured out, like look at them. And then we're our own worst critics in a sense of like,
Sure.
I'm new and I had this big idea, like, well, I'm gonna hit the ground running and I'm gonna do this, and this. But we've created such this culture of grace where you guys are able to tell me like, hey, it's actually okay, you can breathe a little bit, and like just because maybe you didn't get this done today, like you haven't failed, or hey, I'm actually still trying to figure this out too. And so just hearing you guys say that is such like a sigh of relief, because number one, you all seem to excel at that so much, whereas I'm still kind of doing the unlearning of learning. It's okay. Like I don't have it all figured out.
It definitely takes some time, because unfortunately that is the predominant like way of operating. I think in most of our, certainly like American culture, I think is like there's this big difference. It's like everything is sort of a performance, and like everyone knows it's a performance, but like we don't talk about it all that much. And like there's like your work persona, and then like the rest of you, and everyone's doing the same thing. Like everyone, if you get someone in like an unguarded moment, they're like, you might catch them and be like, oh yeah, no, I don't know what I'm doing either, or yeah, obviously the schedule is ridiculous and like it's killing us all, but we got to keep going because of X, Y, and Z reason or something. So I don't know, to the extent that I can, I really try to get out of that and just say what it is, and talk to people like they're people, and like just go from there, because it can be like super oppressive. I've never been there, and unfortunately I think it's fairly common.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the exception to get out of that a little bit.
Well, Drew, do you think from your perspective, and I guess I'll age myself when I say this, but you graduated in a different decade than I graduated in, as like a more
I'm the only one here with gray hair, so you don't have to worry, Chelsey.
I have hair dye, Matt, so you keep oh my
I have found one. Don't tell anybody.
It was like, what? I'm like, well, okay. Drew, do you find as a more recent graduate that like your generation is more looking for like the culture that Matt's created? And like I'm finding from my generation, we've sort of also experienced like what Matt said, like is fairly common, like that go, and that leadership mentality of like, well, we'll work you, until you're falling over, but and we'll just keep doing it. Like we'll just keep doing it. Do you find that like your like recent graduates are more so driven to that culture? And I just feel like all of you guys are such a breath of fresh air in terms of like none of us want that. And I'm hopeful that less and less people are able to say what Matt and I just said, like, oh yeah, I've been there, I've experienced that. Like, wouldn't that be so great?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's still, specific to each person. There's a lot of people my age who I know who like they genuinely just, they found a career that they love, and that they're like, I'm gonna grind this out, my 5 days a week and put everything into it. And then, other people want that lifestyle because they want to like, have a more relaxing way of life, which is also, very respectable if, you can make it work. And then like my take on it was, I love the balance, because I just, as someone who is, young and able to try new things still, it gives me that freedom. So I think what I'm trying to say is I think it's a very important, way of work to include and offer to people
Yeah.
so that, they can kind of take whichever route they want to go. But it's still good. Like if you still want to work, super hard on your job and career, like you still have that ability. But I think it really is still kind of person by person based. And I've seen so many of my friends go in each of those directions. And I just think having that option is just awesome because it gives you that freedom. Like, what if something does pop up? Maybe you are career oriented for like 3 years, and then something pops up, and you're like, wait, like now I want to throw 2 hours a day into this. It's awesome to have that ability because you never know where life's going, and it's awesome to have doors open still, and it keeps you, keeps you at peace to know that opportunities are still everywhere, and can
Yeah, I think
make a
that
decision.
kind of speaks to like a little bit more of, I think, the fundamental aspect of what what I had in mind when I started the firm, and what I'm trying to cultivate is like not necessarily any one way of working, like not necessarily either extraordinarily hard driving all the time every day on one end, nor like totally super chill, like do whatever you want. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And like on the other end either.
On the
Like,
beach all day.
yeah, but just like human, like just like all of us. Like I'm always telling people, like, yeah, there are times when I'm, full speed and like I feel like I can run through walls, and I will do 15 different things before 8 o'clock in the morning. And like it's there are those days, right? And then there's other days where like I sit at the computer and I stare and I type a couple words and I get up and walk around. I get another cup of coffee, come back, type a couple more words, like scroll on LinkedIn for an hour, wonder what just happened. Like there are those days too, and like it's just like it's a human thing. And as Drew said too, like it varies day to day, it varies season to season in your life. And it's the same thing as like remote or in office or whatever. Like there's not a one right answer. Like it is something that's constantly fluctuating for different people, different firms, different times in your life, different days of the week. And so like I really just want to be able to talk with people and have everyone be able to contribute as best they can in whatever way works for them. And like that's the one thing I think I missed most earlier in my career, was not so much that like the expectations were what they were, but like it was just sort of more one-sided. It was like, this is like somebody decided this is best, and then that's the way it's going to be, as opposed to like looking for people that can be contributing to your vision, and then trying to work with them in a way that allows them to contribute at the best of their ability. Like it's a kind of a subtle difference, I think, but we're doing it for something. Like we have some bigger picture goal we're trying to accomplish, I think. And so it's sort of like whether you set that as the ultimate thing no matter what, or if you set that as the ultimate thing but realize that along the way you have to make some diversions, right? Like you may not do a straight line to get there, and ultimately the best way to get there, might be this kind of circuitous route that is not like just a full frontal assault all the time. And I think that's been like one of the most important factors for me, is like just extending. Like I've always been okay at like telling myself like, you know what, it's all right, like it's not your day today, like you'll make up for this tomorrow, it's fine. And just sort of extending that to other people too. It's pretty much what it comes down to, is just like recognizing that like everyone else is probably more like me than not, and they probably are going through the same kinds of struggles and challenges that I am, and just extending that same sort of grace, I think, is important.
Yeah, well, and I think I said this to you at one point, Matt, like as being a fairly new leader, so to speak, one thing I'm learning is like that the stereotypical hard conversations, they don't have to be so hard. Like
Yep.
it could be as simple like, hey, Matt, my little one's really sick today and I'm really stressed. So I'm going to be great at 3 p.m. when I can give you my full attention, but between 12 and 2, not so great. Like
Right.
these are just human things. And it's so interesting to me that it's such a light bulb to all of us that we're all just human. Like the
Yeah, exactly. We're like, how weird is that?
really glaring at me in this conversation is that like we're all like, yeah, we really are all human. Like
Yeah.
that's a new concept.
Right. It's this huge unlock to just talk to people as if like they're very similar to you and probably have the same concerns and problems and challenges and also successes and joys. Like that, it's such a weird thing that is so foreign. It really.
Yeah. Like the humanness is actually the hard part.
Yeah, for sure.
But really, it's
Why is
just
that?
the
So messed up.
structural thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's so funny because I already in like a year and 8 months, you know, wherever I'm at with Copeland, somewhere around there. Like I've had 2 conversations with Matt that like, and we laughed about this when we had our like one-on-one meeting where I was like, you know, when I'm growing up, I'm having conversations with Matt that my dad told me not to have with my boss. And I just think that's so funny because we can have those conversations now because we've created that culture. And I think that's very important because you just can't lie to each other. You know, we'll never figure out who we are or what we want or, you know, create that safe space to like say like, hey, maybe when something isn't working out, that's fine. You know, we'll have that conversation. We'll talk it through. We'll try and be better, go from there. But yeah, no, I think that's so funny. Just, you know, we're able to do so much with this firm that, you know, you just, you know, fundamentally used to not be able to do or say. And I think that's so cool that, you know, we can make those changes and, you know, yeah, just be human and friends, you know, which is important. So
yeah, for sure. It makes the harder conversations a lot easier too, I think. You know, like if ultimately you do have to have a conversation that's you know, giving some candor in feedback, like that's a lot easier when you have this well of goodwill built up ahead of time. And it's a lot easier to believe that the feedback is coming from a place of support and encouragement and not from a place of like criticism and, you know, tearing down, right? Like if your best friend comes to you and is like, hey, you know, whatever this thing that, you know, you've been doing lately is you know, causing me some harm, then that's a lot easier to take than like the person who's just nonstop every day telling you what you're doing wrong, right? Like you tend to, you know, you write that off or you get resentful. But if someone who has built up like a big reservoir of goodwill, you're a lot more likely to assume that they're trying to help you in some way, rather than just you know, expressing some annoying emotion that you can write off and not pay attention to.
Well, and I think it makes it too, like sometimes the constructive feedback isn't always a big thing, right? Like it could be something as simple as like, hey, Chelsey, like, could you put this on your calendar? Or, hey, could you, like, they can be these small things, but if you're afraid of someone, so to speak, that small thing might actually feel really big. When in reality, it was no different than me saying like, oh, hey, I just need to turn this light on really quick. Like it's such a small thing, but when you really care for someone and you respect them and they respect you in turn, it just becomes, again, just like the human part of the conversation. Like we all annoy each other in some way at some point in our lives. Like we're all human, and you can just nicely say like, oh, hey, could you do this small thing? And it doesn't have to be like an internalized worry that you received this feedback. Like it really could be that small thing and then you move on. Like there's no fear, you know?
Yeah, like it's just communicating information. Then like, you don't necessarily have like what's that?
Such a good way to put it. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're just, you know, I have some information that would be good if you also have that information. So here it is. Right.
Yeah.
It's like that simple.
From that. Yeah. Well, it is like, it doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, you said this. So now I wonder, like, no, that's just it.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's kind of like leading me to a thought that I've had too, or kind of like always had, and it's not even like specific to work, but kind of like I think applicable to like life in every way. You know, like if your leader or someone in your life, you know, gives so much and offers you so much, your employees or your friends, like they want to be there for you too. You know, it's it's like if you create that culture, people are going to want to help you, you know. And I think that's been something I've realized, where like I'm very grateful for what, you know, Copeland has offered me. So it's like I want to, you know, do my part the best I can. And you know, I think if you're in an opposite situation where people, you know, are maybe over pressuring you, or you know, maybe just putting too much on you, whatever that may be, you know, in more detail, but you know, you might not feel as motivated or, you know, happy to, you know, work through certain things. And
No, for sure. And I mean, I've been on both sides of that coin,
Mhm.
and it's mutual too. Like, I heard, you know, one of the folks I listen to a lot is this guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, and one of the things that he says about leaders, or you know, like business leaders, is like, you know, you people need to recognize that really you work for your employees, not the other way around. And I find that like a really valuable mindset. And it to what Drew just said, like when the whole team is working in a really positive, constructive way and is fun to be around, and like you feel this energy of like everyone is invested in the idea of what we're doing. And there might be things here and there that like don't go right, but like, you know, I have a genuine deep-seated confidence that like everybody on the team is like really into what we are doing, and like is working hard to accomplish our like collective goals. And that gives me a huge amount of motivation to do what I can in my part of that team to try to help us get there. Right. So it's this mutually reinforcing cycle of like, if you know, if I feel the energy from the whole team, then it helps me give it back and create the right environment where that can keep happening over and over and grow. And it's the opposite when it's not that. It's mutually destructive. Like the resentment builds, the frustrations grow, and everyone starts doing, you know, as little as they can to get by. And, you know, that's obviously, you know, just super destructive and detrimental to the overall success of things.
Aren't you exhausted even thinking about like that way of life, Matt? Like,
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's so bad. We don't want that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, for sure.
gives you the ick.
Yeah.
Yes, the ick.
Absolutely.
And like
Absolutely.
Matt, you were saying too, like when you're talking about like what you want to build, like you're even talking like not just like how we want to design our buildings, but like the culture you want your company, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. That's part of, I have called it from as long as I've had a somewhat defined vision. It's always kind of had these two parts to it. There's like the outward vision that's a little bit easier for for people to understand, because it's more sort of in line with what businesses, you know, often will talk about. And like, you know, I would like us to be doing work that makes our little corner of the world that much better. And, you know, by making buildings last longer and be more comfortable to live and work in, to reduce waste and to make things more energy efficient, and to do all these things that, you know, make a positive contribution to society. Like there's that element of our vision, right? Like we want to be good, good stewards, good contributors to the part of the world where we have an impact. But there's also this like more inward looking vision and purpose that I have had in my mind for as long as I can remember with the firm, is that like the firm is here ultimately to be this like engine that can support all of the things that the people of the firm, like the, you know, the firm is ultimately the people, is what they want to do with their lives, and what they're doing apart from their professional life that also contributes to this community that we live in, right? So like if everybody in the firm is able to be fulfilled in whatever way that means for them, and bring that into their daily life outside work, you know, outside typing stuff into the computer and talking on Zoom meetings and things like that, but like, you know, with their family, with the people that they work with outside of business, with their bandmates, with their teammates, in their club sports or whatever. Like if they can bring that that positivity outside of their work, then that also contributes to this thing that we're trying to do and make our corner of the world a little bit better. And so the firm has, I think, an obligation to help facilitate that and like be the driver that allows people to do that. So instead of coming out of work like needing to somehow make up for this draw that they've been living through, it actually gives them the energy and the financial resources and the time and the means and the capability to go forth into the world and actually be some positive change. So creating the circumstances in the firm that facilitate that happening has always been super important to me. Like having the firm exist for that purpose is like an explicit goal in my mind. Building some thing, some entity, some engine that can make that happen, that can, you know, turn the value that we create for the community into that power to help the people that work in the firm, so that they in turn can then give it back to the community in different ways. That cycle is like what, to me, is what business is all about and what makes it interesting and fun to me. And has been always really important to me since I've started.
Well, and helping people to thrive and helping people unlock a little piece of that and like helping them to be well in general and learn from each other. I think that contributes directly into making our little corner of the world a better place, right? Like ultimately, whatever
Absolutely.
your job is, if you're working together, however much time you spend, you're with those people. And so while you're doing that, if you can help them to be the happiest they can be, you know, like you said, Matt, it just goes back out into the community and trickles into the world. And I think each generation will start to see that even more and more and more. Like there's a way to integrate your work into your personal life and your hobbies into your work and just all these different pieces of your life that you can weave together when you're happy and you're working in a good place. You just, you have the ability to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the world is crazy. It has probably always been crazy. And the best way that I know to feel like I have some agency there, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, is this, and like using whatever capabilities I have to try to contribute in a positive way to, you know, fight against the tide of some of the crazy. And so that involves like the both internal, like with the team, and external in terms of what we produce and put out to the world.
Well, and I think too, like in leadership, when you're a leader in any capacity in your role, you earn the respect and the trust of people. Like when you say, hey, I have this idea, guys, and those people come along with you, like ultimately they're trusting you with that idea that they're going to be okay if they follow along with that. And I think that that can be in business, in a team, like, hey, I'm trusting you. You're going to make this building solid and safe. You're going to do a good job to keep us safe. Or, hey, I'm going to come and work here with you on your team. You know, you're going to treat me right. You're going to pay me fairly. Or even your family, like, I'm going to take this job, but I want you to know, like, this is going to be better for our family. So, or in a band, like, Drew, you have this new idea. You're going to put it out there and they're going to trust you to follow. Like, we're going to make this better. And I think there's something really powerful about that.
Absolutely. And I definitely see that, and I take that responsibility very seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big responsibility.
I think it's just very good like culture to have in general in life, you know, and I think that's like the thing that I love the most, and like just want to like help, you know, try and bring people into the mindset of like, hey, you can be great at your work, but like you can be who you want to be.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't have to like graduate college and like go into your career and like essentially go in a rabbit hole of like, this is my life now, you know. Like I think
Right.
it's like I find it very sad when like young people get forced and like pigeonholed into this direction when, you know, there's so much to do out there and experience and try. No matter how serious you take those other things, it's just a matter of like, this world's got so much to offer, and just have those few extra hours a day to try something new, get better at something, and keep growing personally is just an amazing, you know, advantage to have.
For sure. And I think a lot of it comes down just sometimes to the mental space too. Even hours aside, I wish I could credit the person that wrote it. Maybe if we ever have show notes, I'll put it in the show notes. But this idea that like energy makes time. And
No, I
if,
like that.
right, and like it, like I you know, I know in myself when I'm in a mindset of feeling down and like that, and things are overwhelming. It's really not time that prevents me from doing things a lot of you know, in most circumstances. It's more like the energy and like the feeling of like that there's just too much, so forget it. Like, but when I'm in a good state and I have the energy and I feel like I can do these things, the time becomes irrelevant, and like somehow it happens, right? And I think it's a lot like that with whether you're pursuing a hobby or some side project or a passion project, or whether it's with your work or whatever. But if you have that mental space and energy, then you find the time just happen, it magically shows up, and you do it some way somehow, and it becomes not so much a limiting factor. And so I think that's as much of it as anything, is like creating an environment where like more often than not you have that energy and mind headspace to be able to do the things that you know, you would like to do.
Yeah, well, and I think as a leader, taking that thought and taking the responsibility, and you know, I feel like this is happening, but taking the responsibility to be able to say, like, I'm actually not in the best headspace today to have that conversation. I want to be able to deliver this in a better way. Can we maybe keep this till tomorrow? Or just like creating that space where it's okay for everyone to recognize their best time and
For
their
sure.
best energy, and also helping people figure that out. Like sometimes it does take an outside perspective to be able to say, like, hey, I noticed, like, man, Matt, you had so many great ideas before 8 a.m.
Yeah.
I get up at 5 a.m., which you know all know that I usually am. Like, if that works for you and it's productive for the team, keep it coming. Like,
Right.
that's great. But then also taking that responsibility to remind the person then, like, okay, but then when do you need to slow down? Or, you know, when we actually do still need you here, like as the leader, you have to kind of help everyone find that in themselves.
Absolutely.
I definitely think jumping on the quote that Matt had with, what was it, energy creates time.
Yeah.
It's like, also I feel like, you know, the culture you create creates energy, you know what I mean? And like
For
I
sure.
think that's, you know, very good connection there, because it's like funny, yesterday I'm like running on like 3 hours of sleep yesterday with like flying home from Buffalo and stuff, and I was like, all right, gotta like go to ESPM, and like, you know, all this craziness is happening on site, but like, although I was like super like tired, I was super happy to go like grind through this day and like do what I can for ESPM, and then I had band practice, and you know, you battle through and you have like joy in that, and
Yeah.
like I slept so good last night, but
Yeah.
it was just like it I don't know, it's like, you know, I knew I was gonna have that, there was gonna be some light at the end of the tunnel, and you know, it made
Yeah.
me happy to like fight through it, and like, I don't know, just some, like, that's even empowering. So
It was a good tired.
yeah, it was really good tired.
It's a great story. 'Cause that's, I mean, that in a nutshell is what I have found over and over again in life, is that, you know, like you have the time when you need it, or like the time, you know, it somehow creates itself when you need it to, if you can maintain the energy. And but if you just deplete your energy all the time, then even if you have time, you can't do anything with it. And it's just this cycle. And like, so if you had that day that you had yesterday every day, then sooner or later you're gonna burn out, and you're not gonna be able to do any of those things, right? But when they come along here and there, it's okay.
Yeah,
And so just recognizing that, like, they will come along here and there, and we want to be able to address those when they come. But expecting that to be every day is just silly. And
yeah,
you know, being able to recognize that, and then create a world where that is the normal thing, like accepting that it's an up and down, is the key. And you know, it's challenging, but
yeah.
it's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, I
Well,
think oh, sorry, Chelsea. Go
no,
ahead.
you go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just gonna like, I think it's funny because I'll come home from like, you know, again, like once in a while, like I'll come home from like that 12-hour day of like, I drove 2 hours to Vermont and then full day on site and then 2 hours back. And like my roommates are like, oh, where the hell, like, where have you been? And I'm like, oh, I've been on site all day. And they're just like, oh, they're like, that's terrible. And I'm like, no, like I do it like once every 2 months, so I'm happy to
Yeah.
go like have this one day, and like
Yeah.
it's not a big deal, you know, and you accept those days, and those are my days where I'm like, I'm gonna enjoy work through and through, and then just do work today, you know, and
Yeah.
I'll do
The
my other
cycle.
stuff tomorrow.
Yeah, it's the cycle. Everything has its time.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and accepting the seasons of that too. Like, Drew, when I was your age, if you would have told me that, I was just going to hop on this podcast today where I was kind enough not to give either one of you an agenda, um,
Much
like,
appreciated.
I'd have been like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I have to do this, 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 and this, and this. But now as I'm getting older and I'm learning, like, it's actually just, it's okay. So it's like accepting the seasons of things too, as much as accepting, like, that
Really.
today's just going to be really busy, or like, okay, well, this is actually the season of my career that I'm in now. Like, you just learn and you grow and you accept that. And, I've had leadership experiences that have helped me to shape that. And obviously, like, that's here, and it makes you want to keep coming back, and it makes you want, that season to last. And as you make those changes, you kind of you start to figure it out.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I think that's probably a good note to start to wind up on.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that Drew or Chelsey you want to make sure you mention before we wrap up?
I had like kind of similar, could be like a wrap up kind of thing too. I had a few points just in case you wanted like some talking points, and I had one question that I thought was interesting, and I kind of wanted your guys' take on.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So like when you're like delegating, to maybe like your PIC delegating to a consultant, that's like you obviously want to communicate a ton, but it's like how do you juggle, communicating the right way and not, micromanaging or over communicating too much? Because I think there's also a point of like if when you micromanage or maybe you push too much, you push your team away and you make it not fun for them. And so it's like, how do you juggle that? Like, delegating the right way, but not being overpowering.
For me, I try to err on the side of too little information and too much rope. So I'd much rather have somebody run a bit too far in the wrong direction and then reel them back in and talk about what happened than prescribe every single step along the way and have it go perfectly, but have them not be any different after that experience than when they started. And there's challenges both ways for sure, but I think the challenges are far worse and the long-term risk and problems far greater in like the micromanage approach. And I think that may be like one of the most important things that has helped me in trying to grow this business over the last few years is generally being okay with stuff not working out exactly how I hoped it would work out. When I talk with other people in somewhat similar situations, people who've started their own firm in the last handful of years, one of the really common things that we talk about is like they'll ask me like how do you handle when this X, Y, or Z is not getting done the way you want it to get done. Like how do you make sure that everything is perfect all the time? And like I don't. Like I I've just come to realize that like it's controlled chaos a lot of the time, and like you just do your best. And that's how people learn. And in the long run, it's going to be so much more powerful. And I see it already, even just in, like whether long run is a month versus a day, or it's a year versus a month, or 5 years versus 1 year, like any amount that you extrapolate down the road, the returns are exponentially better if people are making their own mistakes and learning their own lessons along the way. And so obviously there's, like you said, you need to give enough. But prescribing it, so I think to me it's maybe more like the differentiator or like the divider line is somewhere in the realm of like concepts versus steps or something like that, like trying to convey what the end result you're looking for is and what are some of the big picture concepts that go into making that happen versus like open up a document, type your name at the top with
Yeah.
the list, and then put everything, like the more specific you get, the more you take away from those learning opportunities. And in terms of like where exactly that balance is, a lot of it is certainly learned from experience and seeing what works and what doesn't work. But broadly speaking, it's somewhere in that realm of like concepts versus prescribed discrete actions.
That's cool. I like that. That's a good way to summarize it, I think.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys. This was fun. I really enjoyed it.
This was fun.
Yeah, it was a good time.
All right. We'll talk again soon.